Hello out there. Welcome everybody to another live session here at Autocrit. So happy to have you here and to talk about a rather frightening and serious topic, and that is invoking fear in our audiences. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Daniel. I'm the head story coach. I do a lot of the academy workshops and courses. And, AutoCrit is really the home for writers. I'm so happy to be here. We have our writer's desk, which is our platform with all sorts of tools to help you with your writing process from start to finish, the planning, the editing, the inspiration, even down to publishing tools so you can get it out there and into the hands of your audience. And of course, we have our academy side where I spend a lot of my time doing our workshops and courses. And we have a community of fellow authors. In fact, some of them are chatting right now. Let's see. We have Everett, Washington, and Costa Rica, and Pennsylvania, and Minnesota, and New York. And sorry, I'm not going to get to everybody, but yes, you're out there. So happy to have you. But I'm sure you're probably tuning in to hear about evoking fear from your audience. Yes, writing horror stories, or perhaps just writing again to fear itself. So, what are some things to think about when you are trying to evoke these feelings, evoke discomfort, and getting some scares, scaring off the pants of your readers? Well, one thing is to not just write fear. If you want to create a book or create a story that are going to have some frightening and scary moments, if you just keep up fear the entire time without any reprieve, without any nuance, without anything else going on in your story, well, it's going to flatline, and it actually will diminish some of the scares. It'll diminish some of the horror. It's just horror on top of horror on top of horror on top of horror. In fact, it's the juxtaposition of the absolute terrifying with the mundane or even the pleasant that can provide a really powerful moment for your audience. And so, while I understand we can be concerned sometimes when we're writing a scary story to not let the too much of the air out of the balloon, to not let the audience relax too much, to some degree, giving a false sense of security is one of the best things you can do, because then when you ramp it back right back up into the horror, um, it gets it comes out of the blue, and you're caught off guard. I can think of like the movie Alien, right? Where that very famous chest burster scene happens in the middle of a mundane sort of meal, right? And you're not necessarily anticipating that. You might have thought that the problem was more or less dispelled or things like that. And for those of you who didn't know about that scene going into it, it would have been pretty traumatic and pretty unexpected, which is one reason why that film became so iconic. You do want to consider your pacing and your word choice. Of course, this is always a situation when you're a writer. You can pretty much always say this. Excuse me. But when it comes directly to horror, what we're talking about is evoking that sense of urgency a lot of the time. And so, in that regard, you're going to be possibly doing a lot more staccato sentences, quick sentences, especially in a rapid succession. What that tends to do is elevate the reader's heartbeat. Even if they're not listening to it as an audiobook, just what we hear in our head is something stop, something stop, something stop. We're reading that period and we're taking an internal breath. Again, even if we're not reading it out loud, we just hear it in our head, or we literally just pause our eyes or whatever. And so it creates this sort of strobe effect. There's a reason why, the classic movie effect is a lot of quick cuts, right? When you want to have a frightening moment, often it's a slow pan and the think of like the movie Psycho or something like that. And so, yeah, so up until the scare, you might actually want to have elongated sentences. You might want to have a moment where the audience's breath is actually slowed down, so you can contrast that with, oh, heightened awareness, right? Heightened senses. And that's often how it figures out. Yep, somebody was on me. Woohoo! Staccato as the murder violin in Psycho. Yeah. No, it's very true. It's one of those subtle effects, or maybe even not so subtle. Certainly for our writers, we tend to notice it, but a lot of readers may not, and it can have a tremendous impact. You can write about the same thing, but with those sort of techniques, it can take on a greater significance. All right, moving on. Incorporate the unexpected. Yes. We have a tendency to foreshadow a lot in horror because that's a great way of ratcheting up tension. You know, the looming threat. When is it going to hit them? When is it going to hit them? When is it going to come? When is it going to come? Right. But you do want to incorporate some moments that audiences couldn't see coming because, of course, you want to get them on guard. And one of the ways to get them on guard is a sense of uncertainty, which we'll talk about a little bit later. You want to evoke fear from the mundane. Yes. Um, it's very I don't want to say it's very easy. Nothing is very easy in writing, right? Because ideas are easy, but the execution's always difficult. But often from idea standpoint, it can be very easy to create fear from things that are obviously scary. Serial killers, giant spiders, evil clowns, whatever it is, right? People who torture other people. Like these are all things that obviously everybody finds scary because they're terrifying things. But on the other hand, what about things like an elevator? What about things like a car? What about things like a aluminum can? Uh, there are plenty of famous works you can think of, some of which incorporate those exact elements that I was talking about. But there are works like that, and one of the reasons why they become so iconic is because they're asking you to see something that is typically not scary, not particularly intimidating in that light. And that often will be much more indelible in the audience's memory than you just writing another story about whatever, another giant killer spider or another vampire or whatever, another HP Lovecraftian creature and things like that. And I'm not criticizing anybody for doing any of that because there certainly are new things to say about all of those elements and all of those tropes. But again, consider the mundane, even when incorporating those tropes. It can be really fun when you uh, interact with something that you deal with on a regular basis and you make it a little bit scary because what that means is for a horror reader the next time they engage with that object, imagine you have a scene where a coffee mug gets infected or something, and terrible horrible things come from it, and now the next time they interact with a coffee mug, they very well may be thinking of that scene from the book, and then they'll think of you and they'll think of the fact that you evoked that sense of fear and that's what they were looking for, and you've made a relationship with them. It reminds me of with Alfred Hitchcock because he had a scene where he had a murder in a shower, and then I want to say there was another scene where he murdered somebody in some way that somebody cleaned themselves like a bathtub or something. I can't remember. And somebody was like, "Well, how in the world am I supposed to get clean now? Because you constantly scare me with all the ways that I'm supposed to relax." But again, one of the reasons why even something like the movie Psycho is so effective is that a shower is such a vulnerable place, and it's a place that often uh, you're literally exposed, right? You're very vulnerable, and so the idea that something could attack you in that moment is going to be something that will stick in your mind. And even when you're out about, there will be moments when you have to potentially use an unusual shower, like in that movie. It's not at her home; it's at a hotel and things like that. It does certainly stick in your memory. All right, let's move on here. Don't skimp out on characters. Now, again, this is something you could apply to almost any genre, really any story at all, right? I often say that the most important thing in a story is character because characters are like the window to the soul for the plot. I can think of plenty of stories that are successful um, that have plots that are okay, kind of predictable, not super exciting, but have really great characters. I can't really think of the opposite. I can't really think of a story where the plot is amazing, but the characters are not particularly interesting. Somebody might have an example. If you have an example, throw it in the chat. I'm curious. But you can certainly find more examples of interesting characters or world building and not particularly compelling plots, right? A plot that's rote or whatever it is. So characters really do matter a lot. And horror tends to be fairly high concept a lot of the time, right? Again, when you're talking about evoking fear, involving yourself in some sort of frightening imagery or creature or environment, or like I was mentioning, making the mundane scary, you tend to throw a lot into that, into the world building, into the myth making, into the scenes. You can sometimes forget that the characters, they need to be actively involved, right? They need to be people that you actively want to win or want to hopefully not die. And one luxury you have as a horror author is that we don't know how it's going to end, because horror can end, and often does end, in tragedy. It ends with characters not working out for the characters, right? The classic tragedy where characters make a series of fatal flaw mistakes and do not win. In fact, don't even come out alive sometimes. And so, because we have no expectation about that, we can care about the characters in horror in some ways much more than in other genres where killing off the protagonist would be peculiar. That tragedy is really just not an option. And yes, the other danger is something where you end up cheering for the monster because they try to make the character relatable and makes them horrible instead. One thing that I noticed that can happen in horror, and this isn't a critique of it, this is actually a very effective thing to do, is, the anti-hero, the idea of the demon within, or the horrible ways that people tend to act, right? And yeah, you can do that. And then you can even end up with a horror that essentially you are kind of rooting for the monster. You're kind of hoping everybody dies in horrific ways, and it's very satirical. But I would say such works do tend to be a little distancing, right? They feel a little bit more like an Alice in Wonderland or a Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. So a great romp, maybe some fun, but they don't tend to be the sort of things that you're going to be emotionally affected, like you're going to cry, you're going to grip your armchair, that kind of thing, right? And generally, that's what a lot of horror writers are looking for. They're not necessarily trying to write some satirical work. But even if you're writing a satirical work, you want to be careful, because you want to actually be a strong character. Satire works when it goes there. It goes all the distance. It makes them larger than life, makes them iconically terrible, right? You don't want them to just be terrible, as in somebody you wouldn't want to spend time on an airplane with because they would annoy you. You want them to be truly awful, right? Otherwise, it's just in between and it's mediocre and it doesn't seem intentional and it doesn't work. All right, let's move on to explore phobias beyond the surface level. It's all too easy. Again, I say easy, and I'm going to say, well, nothing is that easy because you have to execute on the idea. But it is easy from an ideation standpoint of thinking, what scares me? Water, hydrophobia. All right, so they're drowning in water. Okay. And yes, that can be very scary. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that. However, sometimes you want to ask yourself more. You want to say, okay, why, especially if you're talking about like your own phobia or a phobia that fascinates you, a phobia a friend has or something like that, right? You want to ask yourself, why does it bother me so much? Because then, rather than deal with the phobia as the exact form of the phobia, uh, you want it to be some unique expression of that uh, phobia, right? So, instead of just spiders, okay, so now a giant spiders. Apparently, a JA is very down on spiders. No spiders, right? But you may want to ask yourself, what is it specifically about spiders that bother you? Because you might be able to invent a new creature that is more disturbing. Is it actually the shape of the creature? Or is it just the fact that they are something that can be wandering around your house when you're asleep and potentially messing with you? Well, that can go a lot of different directions as well, right? Is it the fact they're small enough to sneak up on you and potentially harm you? Again, that's something else to think about, right? You do want to ask yourself a little psychoanalyzing of yourself, right? Why it's that phobia exists. So again, you can come up with your own unique expression, and then often you'll end up with an unusual take on it that again isn't just the obvious. We're going to explore the phobia as the phobia in the standard form. Because, yeah, horror readers are often looking for paranormal. They're looking for the exaggerated. They're not, really often looking for it true to life. There are some horror that gets more into that kind of horror realism, but a lot of times it's pretty ridiculous, right? Or it's quite exaggerated. It's quite dramatized because that's what the audience is looking for. A phobia that makes readers develop fears. Exactly, right? Um, People who read horror are looking to find things scary. You could ask yourself why they want to do that. I think sometimes there's an adrenaline involved. It's something to kind of fear and master over and things like that. I don't want to try to psychologize horror readers too much. Uh, but yeah, it is interesting. But ultimately, right, when they're opening up the book, to some degree, they're asking you to say, I'm not typically scared of this. Can you make me scared of this? And that's another thing to consider when you could explore a phobia. Because, yeah, you have somebody like Melody. I love spiders, right? So if you were trying to deal with arachnophobia and you just wrote about straightforward spiders, well, that might not work very well for that person, right? But if you explored why you're scared of spiders, it very well might. Or perhaps you would help them see that in that light rather than just assume, yeah, big spider, that's going to be scary. Not necessarily, not necessarily. All right. Yes, subvert expectations. Again, I kind of come back to this over and over again, but a lot of what makes us scared is the unknown, the unexpected, because if we can't anticipate what's going to occur, well, we can't really react properly. And that makes us very vulnerable, even to death, possibly. When you have different things that happen in the story and the reader didn't see coming, even small things, it adds up to this sense of discomfort and it unsettles them. So, this is why it can be a great idea to subvert even small expectations. Like you pick a trope and you deliberately twist it. And you kind of do that a few times, and then the readers are like, okay, this writer is going to send me in directions I don't know. So anytime I enter a scenario with this character, who knows what this writer is going to do for me. Now, you want to be cautious, because if all you do is just throw out expectations, and then what do you lose basically all sense of tension, right? Tension is a combination of anticipation and uncertainty. So, in order to anticipate certain things, we have to have a certain amount of expectations, right? But we also need to have a certain amount of uncertainty. If you know exactly what's going to happen, you don't really have a lot of tension about it. You're excited, but you're not tense, right? If you're like, oh, I know that my wife got me that whatever I really wanted for my birthday, you're not really tense about it. You just are excited. But if it's like somebody is planning something for me and I'm not sure if I'm going to like it or not, you'll have at least a little bit of tension, even if it's just, well, I don't want to embarrass them by not having the proper reaction. Am I going to be able to put on a good face? Am I going to be worried they spent the money they can't afford on me? It starts to create some dramatic tension. And so, again, subvert expectations, but don't get so bananas that you end up like, and I also went to let it Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, where it's like, I don't even know what to anticipate because anything goes in this book. Because then what you're going to do is lose all sense of tension altogether. You kind of want to thread that needle, but it's something to consider. You definitely don't want to always meet expectations or you lose your tension. All right. Yes, and this is again building tension, right? So, how do you build an anticipation? So, one of my favorite examples to bring up for this is the monster at the end of this book with Grover. In fact, I was just talking about that in my foreshadowing class. It's really like my favorite go-to example because it's just So classic, and it's very easy to understand. And it's so transparent on the page what the author was doing. But it's also very well done. But the idea is, yeah, right at the beginning, Grover says there is a monster at the end of this book. And you're like, well, what is this monster? Right? Especially if you're a little kid, you're very curious. And then what the book does is continue to build tension by constantly setting up traps, because the idea is Grover doesn't want you turning pages. So he keeps setting up little traps that you foil. And so you constantly have tension release, tension release, tension release. Well, what is that creating? That's creating, again, anticipation and uncertainty. Anticipation that whatever trap Grover put up is going to be overturned, but uncertainty in that we don't quite know what comical effect is going to be relating us on the next page. And so you turn the page, comical effect, ha ha ha, anticipation, set up punchline, set up punchline, set up punchline. And that leads you through to the final punchline of the book. So another way that you can look at tension, and this is one reason why horror comedy works so well, is in the comedic realm, right? You think of like a sitcom like Seinfeld or The Office, where so much of their stories is based on tension. When is that person going to break? When is that discomfort from that taboo behavior finally going to cause them to like snap and lose their mind or something like that, right? And again, that's why I think horror comedy works so well, is because it's a fun play with the audience, because in a horror comedy, you never quite know what the payoff is going to be. Is it going to be funny, or is it going to be really scary? Or is it even going to be a little bit of both, right? And so it's such it does, it's like chocolate and peanut butter. It works really well. At least I think chocolate and peanut butter work really well. Uncertainty is scary. Yeah, for the reasons I said. Because if you can't anticipate what's going to happen, you're not going to properly react. It makes you extremely vulnerable. And as an audience member, it means that the author has the license to scare you at any given moment. It puts you on edge. You don't know when anything could pop out at you, right? It's like that haunted house. You don't want a haunted house where every time you enter a room, it's set up in the same way with the same kind of scare, right? You want it to be, oh, well, in this room, somebody's hiding behind this object. Oh, in this room, they come down from the ceiling. Oh, in this room, there was nothing popping out at all, right? And that works a lot better. Sense of isolation. Being alone, of course, makes us more vulnerable. Humans work well in packs, right? In groups with support and moral support and emotional support, all the things. So the horror often isolates characters. Maybe not just one, maybe a group, but it isolates them because it wants to raise the stakes. It wants them to be extremely vulnerable. But keep in mind, when you isolate people, there are multiple ways to do that. It doesn't have to be physical isolation, right? What's scarier, a person alone in a house that's creeping them out, or a person alone in a cult of 100 people that all act the same way? Right? For a lot of people, the second is going to be scarier, because that's even a more vulnerable spot, because you have all these people that are potentially working against you. So keep in mind, isolation can be, emotional isolation of that character, and it can be really effective, because even though there's other people around, they're actually not an asset to you in the situation. They're actually part of the liability of what's going on. Even if it's not quite as scary as the horror cult, it's the people that don't believe you. You're the only person that can see the scary stuff happening, and just nobody else, everybody else thinks you're nuts. That's really scary. In some ways, that's more scary than if that same person was alone, wondering if they were nuts, viewing all these scary things, right? But again, isolation, no matter how you slice it, works well. It evokes fear, again, because of the sense of vulnerability. And yes, playing with reality, like wondering if you're nuts, is great. Unreliable narrators. Horror is often written in a deep point of view. We're in the shoes of that protagonist, because that's a way to get visceral and sensory and, but we don't know if that person is telling the truth. We know they're telling the truth as they see it. Perhaps, maybe they're even lying to us, possible. But most, at the very least, they're telling the truth as they see it, which could still be deceptive to us, because how much do they really know about reality? Are they actually going nuts? Are they seeing things? Are they overly paranoid? Are they overly naive? All different kinds of things like that. Unreliable narrator is a great way to create even more uncertainty with the audience, because we're not even fully trusting what the book is saying about what's going on, which makes us very curious about what's going to happen. Also, keep in mind, an unreliable narrator indicates a person that isn't at one with the universe very well. right? Because if they're not able to portray the universe as it really exists, and we know that, then we also know that they are not good at anticipating what's going to happen next. They're not the kind of person that could do a scientific experiment with a good hypothesis. They're going to get it wrong because they don't understand how the world works. And so, if you establish that this person is pretty incapable about basic things, then when it gets more outlandish, you're like, yeah, I don't know if their experimentation on this method to kill the monster is going to work at all. Like, are they even at all astute at observing the monster? And so, it can create all this sort of uncertainty and drama and intrigue and tension about what is going on. And finally, I'm going to end you with here end with discomfort is generally a good piece of advice for horror. People don't want to end the book feeling like it's too buttoned up, it's too happy. Now there is like a cozy horror subgenre in which case it goes that direction often and ends up kind of heartwarming. Yeah, but that's why it's that style, right? But for a lot of pretty much everybody else, the idea is that you want them to feel the fear after they close the page. It should not feel like the threat is completely gone. You need to have that sense of concern. It needs to linger, just like you would for any other genre, right? If you're writing a fantasy, you're going to have that sense of wonder you want to linger, romance, that sense of love or eroticism to linger. For horror, you want that sense of timidity, nervousness, fear. You want that to linger. So, just be cautious. You can certainly have heroes win in a horror, but there's usually a asterisk a quote accompanied with that. All right. So that brings us to the fact that, well, if you've enjoyed some of these thoughts, you can join us for our horror writing package, where we are going to be discussing a lot of these things in a further depth. In fact, we have our very own Gareth, who will be coming back for Nightmare Fuel starting a week from Monday on October 7th. But we do have a great deal right now, which is our early bird offer, which is 50% off of a lot of different courses. It includes Nightmare Fuel. It includes a Gothic fiction course, which is a self-paced course taught by Rain Hall. It includes the foreshadowing workshop. I just finished first session, but don't worry, you didn't miss it. We have another session coming up on Sunday at 8 p.m. Of course, you can always just go back right away today. So you can buy this right away or watch the first session of the foreshadowing workshop if you want. And then we have a narrative tension workshop. And then we have the Tales from the Horror Club, because again, Gareth, our resident horror expert, has been talking about horror for quite some time. So there's multiple hours of great material found in that as well. Of course, just in time for Halloween for those of you who enjoy that season. And yeah, good times. And honestly, even if you do not write horror, it's going to be helpful if you just like to write about fear. What I love about Gareth and the way that he approaches the topic is he really gets into the psychology on it. He gets it into depth. It is an intense course. It's got a lot, and be happy, and you'll be happy to know that you do not have to attend anything live. You get hours of the recordings if you're not able to, and you do get to keep it as long as you want. It'll be at your disposal on our cloud, and you can access it anytime you want to revisit. So no need to binge watch everything all at once or get too crazy about it right now if you don't quite have the time. But yeah, power packed couple of weeks coming up for those of you who love horror. I personally love that strategy. I love to just kind of immerse myself in learning and getting it like all in and then going out and writing, that works well for me. But again, if that's not your style, you'll have all that content to consume. You could literally take months going through it if you would like. There is a lot there. It is dense. And of course, very soon, next week, in fact, we have our kickoff of the Novel 90 Writing Challenge. So exciting. So excited for this. I've already been mentioning this in my video vlog that you've been hopefully watching here on YouTube, where I've been going through and fixing my book series. One of the reasons why I've been going back through some of those is because I want to finish that series. I want to write book number 4. And I want you to join me. And I want you to join Catherine and join Becca. And we're all going to be writing books as part of the Novel 90 Writing Challenge. So starting in October, we are going to be planning, writing, and editing books. And our goal is to have something ready to go come January of 2025. It's an aggressive timeline. And to be honest, it really doesn't matter if you complete all of that. You're going to enjoy all of our wonderful write ins and excitement and all of that. Whatever you do in the next 90 days, I can guarantee if you join the challenge, you are going to get more writing done than maybe you've ever had in your life. You certainly will have the opportunity to, because again, we're going to be there along the way as accountability partners, motivation. We're all going to be cheering each other. We all recommend that you join. And of course, you get to join a team. So if you're joining my team, you're going to be in the outliners, the planners. Whoop, whoop. If you join Catherine, you're going to be with the pantsers. If you join Becca, you're going to be with the plantsers. Now, this challenge is free. So I know some of you on YouTube are not AutoCrit Pro members. You do not have to be an AutoCrit Pro member to join. Feel free to sign up anyway. So yeah, and also tell your friends, right? It's going to be so much fun. And we'll have a little bit of friendly competition. We'll have some check ins with our teams and try to figure out where everybody's at. I have all the faith in the world that the planners are going to completely dominate. I'm just saying the other people don't have a chance. We'll see what happens. Sorry, Catherine. Yeah. But anyway, yeah, we're gonna have a friendly competition with it. It's gonna be a lot of fun. And no matter what team you're on, we're rooting for you. We all want you to be incredibly successful. I think Plancer is probably gonna have the most people. So that's if you want to be in the biggest pond, you can go there. Planners will probably be the smallest because I know a lot of artists don't like to plan. It's okay. You know, numbers don't matter. What is it? Size matters not, right? Uh, we're gonna be doing all different kinds of things. But what if yeah, I don't want to do the soul search to decide if you're a planner or planter? Just join multiple teams. This isn't Hogwarts, right? So when you sign up, you get a button and you can say which team you're on. If you want to be on multiple ones, go ahead and hit multiple ones. It's okay. we will not hold it against you, and we're not going to have like secret passwords so that only certain people can go to certain events, right? Anybody can come to anything. So if you are, and that's also something that'll be really fun. We're going to be sharing our writing processes with you because that's what we're doing too. We're going to be doing these write-ins. So I'll share some of my outlining and planning processes, and Catherine will share her pantsing. I know Catherine talks about October being a prep month for her. I don't know what pantsers do to prep. I'm gonna find out. I'm like, how do you prep? Because you don't know what you're doing. Isn't that the problem? But yeah, so that'll be fun. And I'm gonna be curious to see Becca and where she finds that balance between how much outlining or planning she does versus how much she pantses. So, and I'm sure all of you can share your projects as well and your processes. That's going to be the whole fun of this. So yeah, we're gonna have all of these different like write-in events. We're gonna have weekly updates on YouTube. It's gonna be a crazy end of the year, October, November, December. Join us again. It's free. We're gonna have prizes. We are going to be kicking it off tomorrow, not tomorrow, next week at 1 p.m. on YouTube. However, we have a special launch party before that. For those of you on the East Coast, it's going to be on the later side because we're going to do a countdown to midnight. And you can find that inside AutoCrit on the calendar. You can RSVP for that. Those of you on the West Coast, it's not quite so late. So if you want to join us late, we're going to do that. We'll have some giveaways and things like that there for the fun of that. Because we like a good party. What can we say? As much as we call this a challenge, it's really like a 90-day. It's really like a 90-day party. Like, let's be honest. We're gonna be having so much fun, and I am looking forward to really seriously writing again. I've been spending so much time this past decade helping other authors, being a coach, being an editor, that it's like I got to get back in and get some more writing done because I've been missing it. So I'm super, super excited. All right. Also, in the AutoCrit world, we have Hook 'em Live. Yep. So if you want to join us for that, sign up in the calendar. And yeah, we'll be reading your opening line and giving feedback. We also have copy editing coming up in the AutoCrit 101 world. So that's going to be really fun. That's going to be Saturday at 2 p.m. Hook 'em Live is going to be Wednesday at 6:30 p.m. And Hook 'em Live is an AutoCrit Pro event. AutoCrit 101 is open for anybody. So if you are not familiar with the Writer's Desk or you'd like to learn about it, it's a great series where you can come in. We've also been simulcasting them, sort of like a little bit of a delay, and putting them up here on the channel as well. So if you like and subscribe, you'll see that. And of course, I've been talking about getting back into writing with my series. If you haven't yet, you can check out the Fixing a Broken series. 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 It's very serious. I'm just gonna keep going seriously. But it is a lot of fun. It's very casual. It's just real life, raw, me going through my work, showing my processes. A lot of you have liked it. If you like to know how the hot dog is made, come and watch it. That's what it is. I wanted to, I think of like, not that I'm comparing myself to this, but like I think of like the Lord of the Rings special features and how great it is that you feel like a fly on the wall. So like that's the idea, right? I want it to feel like a fly on the wall, real deal, the way it is. Yep, people like it. Ah, fantastic. Ah, thank you so much. Yeah, so check that out, like and subscribe, and hit the bell for updates on that. Otherwise, I will see you next week for the beginning of the Novel 90 challenge. We have some fun surprises, all sorts of things coming your way. It's going to be a really crazy end of the year, but I'm all for it. Launching our way into 2025. Yeah. It's time to do it, everybody. If you're the kind of person who's been out there of that, you've always wanted to be a writer, but you just haven't gotten over the hump, we're going to get you there. We'll take you over. It's like, I can't write your book for you, but I can carry you like Lord of the Rings. I will do that for you. We'll all do that for you. We're here for each other. So come on board. This is your time. And we will see you around AutoCrit. You have a wonderful